Well, joining us today is George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals, following news on the funding and an update from the Zulu Lithium project. Well, thank you for joining us today. George, how are you?
Yes, I'm all right. I think I'm more overworked than I have been before, but nevertheless,
Well,
it's all good.
that makes sense. That makes sense. We're, of course, fast approaching that deadline there. And, of course, the RNS said Premier is now funded until first production. Can I just ask, first of all, regards to placing, I don't know what you can say on this, but can you say if it went to a single entity or a handful of entities? Anything you can give on that?
I don't have a copy of the RNS in front of me, but I think that we did disclose who had placed it, if I may.
Sure.
It was certainly in a draft subscription. Here we go. Yeah, it was arranged through CMC Markets UK. It's in the announcement under the subscription. They acted as the company's placing agent in respect of the placing.
Right.
So it went to a number of parties, but they acted as the placing agent.
Right. Okay. So probably a number of parties took place in it. Okay. But it was well received, was it? Just there was there was good appetite.
As I understand from them, yes.
Good.
The impression that I had from them was that had there been any further headroom, they would have been very comfortable.
Okay. Yeah.
To have taken it up. I mean, we had limited headroom, and there wasn't much that we could actually do.
Sure.
In terms of any placing. So that's as far as it could go.
As far as it could go. Okay. Well, of course, I know we spoke before about the different funding routes. We talked short term, maybe about bridging or bank loans, and it was mentioned that was a possible option. But the RNS states that funding is now largely dependent on Zulu being in production, and the subscription is the best intermediate solution to secure further project funding in order to get to that that production to start end of February or late February 2024. So is it fair to say that lenders are interested but want to see confirmed production and thus cash flow before they sort of push the button?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay. And that's why.
And that's Mark. That's been made very, very clear to me, and it's in direct meetings with the senior officials in more than one institution.
Right. So you wouldn't be concerned about getting those loans once you've got the bank, once you've got the production going. They're pretty much on board.
You've got to have money in the bank before everything's absolutely on board. But in terms of the conversations we've had, yes, I am very confident of the support.
Okay, good. So the raise is then just to see you to that interim getting into production. Of course, it all does come down to production, doesn't it? And again, from the RNS, the placement assures the Zulu of plant startup, subject only to suppliers meeting their obligations and undertakings targeted for next week. And this remains the target at this time. Well, I mean, the question's got to be, how confident are you of production by the end of Feb? I mean, that's subject to suppliers and obligations. Maybe a little bit of a caveat thrown in there, George.
Yes, but it really is not intended to indicate any lack of confidence in this. I mean, for example, the major components that have been included, the thickener, as one example, is a major structure. That structure is effectively complete. It requires a discharge connection into the mica plant, which is a bolt-on pipe. Largely, it's there.
Okay.
The structures are complete. That's sort of where this. I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me go back. The thickener is largely complete, and simply awaits a connection into the mica supply supply component of this plant.
So when you say obligations, it's these sort of smaller obligations that you don't foresee, and the suppliers are not foreseeing any issues with that.
No, at this point in time, no. Similarly, on the mill, which was probably the biggest component, the hydrosizer components, the additional screening components, all of these major items are all in situ in place.
Okay.
So that you're at a point where it's a case of loading the mill with the grinding media, which is due to arrive later today. Switching on the water, making sure that the pumps and so on and so forth are adequately connected, run, etc., etc.
Okay.
So all the major works are in place and done. All the people are at site, all the components are at site. Everything that is needed to make this thing run is there right now.
Is there right now? Okay. So, I mean, I do have to ask, if you do miss the deadline, what would be the plan after that? Will it require an EGM?
I haven't seriously considered an EGM at this moment in time. I would like to avoid it if I can.
Of course.
Yeah, so I don't think there's much more that I can say about that right now.
Yeah, until you need to address it. But hopefully that isn't the case if you're feeling confident in you've got about 2 weeks left. And that is, I think, fair to say you are confident.
Mark, I'm confident that the suppliers are at the moment going to meet their deadline. It is obviously still conditional upon them doing so. The plant must then be switched on and run. The individual components have all been individually run. We don't foresee any particular issues with any of them. It still has to run in integration and properly and completely commissioned. But we do not anticipate the problems of the magnitude that we had previously experienced.
Okay. And have you been on site this week? How are things looking?
I was on site on Tuesday, and it is a hive of activity.
Okay.
I know that is still the case at the moment, and I will be on site again from early next week for the duration of next week.
For the duration of next week. Okay. Well, that would be good if we can talk while you're on there, as we're getting very close to this deadline. But let's just talk, I want to talk about the funds. You say the funds will be used for final payments related to the thickener purchase and installation, final payments related to the ball mill and associated hydrosizers, transport, installation, and thereof. Now, a question that is on a couple of shareholders' minds, I think, is why are Prem paying for all the extra modules when originally it was a part of the design and the price, which then didn't work, and we're having to pay for this sort of failed design work? And there's some sort of concerns about why Prem and sort of shareholders are having to stump up the bill for this. And is there any sort of compensation coming from the plant supplier on this regard?
Well, there will be a reconciliation and an accounting that is going to follow this. And that is a clear part of the understanding. There is an acceptance of responsibility on the part of the plant supplier, which I think we've discussed before. And an example of that was related to the previous screens that were used, the previous mill that was in place, and so on. There will be a reckoning and an accounting that will. My focus has been, let me make this point clear, that my focus always has been on what to do to get this thing working as quickly as possible, not necessarily to get sidetracked into other issues that may have delayed anything any further. So an assurance can be given there will be an accounting to follow.
Okay, perfect. Now, you've mentioned some of the elements there, the ball mill, for example, the thickener. They are on site, they are in situ. You said you're waiting grinding media for the ball mill, so that has to be installed on the inside, and then you can run up and start testing it. Does that work with the plan?
Well, the mill functions. The mill in situ functions. The grinding media is the forged steel balls that go into the mill. Now, that can only be loaded. Or will be loaded, should I say, immediately before we actually start putting material through it.
Okay.
I mean, it's simply a case of putting quite a few tens of tons of steel balls into it.
Okay.
That's not a commissioning or difficult issue.
Okay. And then, so that'll be ran when you're ready to go, effectively. With regards to the thickener and the hydrosizer, idea, will they be tested when it runs up, or you've done some pre-testing on these elements?
Well, the one hydrosizer was installed and running already. The other is an identical unit.
Okay.
The pumps that are in situ, they were pumps that were there originally. There's a reconfiguration of some of the flow, but it's using the same control systems, the same pumps.
Okay.
It's all stuff that is and has already operated.
Okay, that's fine. Now, of course, on the sorters here, specifically, do we have any more of an idea what the issue is with the sorters? I know the TOMRA engineer has been on site there. Has he identified any issues or managed to sort of sort any issues out? How are the sorters looking?
Okay, so it is intended from the plant suppliers that the sorters operating in series, that's 2 XRT and 2 UV with some color sorting capability, that between these sorters operating in series, that they will deal with the removal of the waste. Now, that is the requirement that has been placed on the plant suppliers. And they understand absolutely that it is a definitive requirement. It has to be done properly and completely. I've made the point all the way through that the fallback position, should nothing work, and it's not a case of nothing working because the sorters are functioning, have been optimized. The plant suppliers are on site. The suppliers of the UV sorting equipment are on site at the moment and will remain on site to do whatever has to be done. But we will, from a fallback position, be taking great care on our ROM pad, and we will be inspecting as far as we can to try and limit waste that could go into the plant. So that always was a position we would adopt, and we will enforce that position.
Okay. And you're saying they have been optimized, but the suppliers remaining on site to ensure that they are working as they should be, as per design spec.
Absolutely. It is our absolute requirement that the sorters remove waste. The plant suppliers understand this is a definitive requirement. They are there. They're doing everything they can to get this done. If there is any issue, then we have a fallback position. And we will attempt to assist them in any event through removal and identification of waste before it gets into the plant.
Yeah. Okay. I guess you can understand the sort of the concern or the risk that might be giving to shareholders there on are these actually going to work properly as they should do?
Mark, I'm not trying to portray a risk per se, but it would be inappropriate of me to try and give a complete 100% guarantee of a future event. So I know what efforts have gone into this. I know that the plant suppliers understand the requirement. I know that they expect to be able to meet the requirement. If they didn't expect to meet the requirement, we'd have a completely different conversation.
Okay. They expect to meet, so that's good. You've heard that from them, so that's good. Okay. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the EPO and just get a bit of a more of an understanding about this area, because there was new licenses that were announced here, and you've of course got the greater EPO area as well. So I wonder if you could perhaps just shed a little bit of light on what's going on. You've in the area, you've registered claims, I believe. So could you perhaps just explain a little bit about what's going on in the EPO area, and then I might have some more questions on that.
Okay, so in terms of areas within this greater EPO, excuse me, where there are clearly identified other pegmatites that may be mineralized to an extent, a greater or lesser extent. Those areas in the EPO, we have lodged or we have secured and we've paid for additional claim areas, similar tenement to the original Zulu claims. So that's within the EPO. And those claims, we are the only ones within the EPO who could apply for those mineral claim blocks, which we have done. It was exclusive to us while the EPO is valid. So that's been done. Those areas, as far as we're concerned, are secured. There are obviously ongoing work obligations associated with them, but they're secured, whether or not the EPO is renewed. And I think, let me make that point, that they are there, and they would supersede any relinquishment in terms of the EPO. That's number one.
So that's an interesting point. Yeah, so they supersede the EPO. So you've got a license for the whole EPO area, but you've also got these claims within the EPO. Is that right?
Correct. They're within the EPO. So should the EPO not be renewed, these claims survive. And these claims are over identified areas that are mineralized and or potentially mineralized that we have identified so far. So I think that's an extremely important statement to make. And let me also say that not the entire EPO is mineralized. There are huge areas within the EPO that do not contain any pegmatites. And to simply try and maintain a whole area is counterproductive. The purpose of an EPO is to give us security, to allow us to explore. We've explored. We've said these are the parts of the EPO that have value as far as we're concerned, and we have now covered those with these claim certificates.
Okay, so there's almost no need to have the whole EPO covered, like as you say, because it's a lot of management involved in that. Secure the areas in that EPO that are interest to you.
That is correct partially. I'm going to just qualify it, because there may still be some areas within the greater EPO that are not fully explored by us yet, but that may still contain some mineralization. So that is the reason why in the background there is an application to renew the EPO as a whole. But we can, as we go forward from this point, very quickly start excluding areas with no mineralization within the EPO. So I think we've tried to create an environment where we are acting as responsible citizens in terms of the state by saying this is where we've definitely got mineralization, and by saying, look, there are other areas we'd like to spend some more time on, but we're certainly not going to sit for another 3 years with this whole EPO area, even if it is renewed, because we don't need to. We'll know very quickly where we want to be.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. That's good. And I mean, have any gone? Yeah.
Sorry, may I also add that part of the EPO area where the actual Zulu mine is, and where the existing Zulu pit and immediate extensions and other associated ore bodies are, that area is under application for a mining lease, which is a completely different animal altogether. Okay, so that area does not act, it would actually be outside of an EPO now, but it is covering also areas that were originally within the original EPO.
Okay, yeah, and it's a mining lease, so you can actually go and exploit it, whereas the claims are just securing the claim, so to speak, for future exploration.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of sort of people looking in the area, have you had any approaches or interested parties looking to perhaps make a deal on part of the EPO, or are we too early to be talking about that?
There's been a lot of competition in and around the EPO during the course of the period while the spodumene price was as high as it was. So is there a lot of interest in the area? Yes, there is. Are we ready to start trying to make a deal with somebody in respect of a particular part of the EPO? No, I don't think so at this stage. I think this is something that we'd rather have as a greater Zulu project.
Okay, and are you thinking then post-production how an expansion could look like in terms of how you might go and explore in the EPO there, how that might be funded, and indeed how you might increase production at Zulu? Are you thinking that's beyond production, or are you solely focused on next week?
No, look, I'm very, very heavily focused on next week, but I'm thinking beyond production. And I think let me make the point that the original securing of the Zulu deposit was not to produce spodumene for lithium hydroxide purposes. It was because we believed this was a great industrial minerals deposit with tantalum. Now, I think we have to go back to basics and accept that this deposit has always been predicted as one that could produce technical grade spodumene. And technical grade spodumene, low iron, high Li2O content, does command a significant premium. We at the moment have not got a functioning tantalum recovery circuit in. We need to get that in. And then we have the potential for very high purity quartz, one or two other industrial minerals. So Enzaplan has been re-engaged to go and look at the enhancements to the flow sheet to achieve some of that. And they are already looking at it. I might add that we have carried for some time a substantial credit at Enzaplan, which will be utilized for this. So that's on that aspect of it.
Yeah,
then there are certain other discrete pegmatites within the EPO that are not spodumene. There are some that are very high grade petalite. Petalite is a different situation altogether today, and there is a shortage of supply. We have strong proposals coming to us at the moment from people wanting to acquire petalite and wanting to do so on the basis of assisting to put in additional plant and equipment to get to that stage. So this is the kind of discussion that is ongoing in the background. There's a lot of this sort of discussion sitting there in terms of the future of Zulu.
And how could you advance that then? I mean, because you obviously you need money to go and explore a bit further in these areas. Would you need to get into cash flow, or would you look to get into cash flow, get some loans, and then use some of that? Have you thought about how it might look in terms of actually exploiting these other elements?
In terms of some of these pegmatites, some of the illegal, whatever one wants to call it, mining that was ongoing during that phase when the price was so high, has done a lot of the basic exploration for us.
Okay.
And in some instances, there are huge exposures of this. So additional exploration work is not going to be that onerous or that expensive. That's the first thing. The second thing is that because of the exposure, material is readily available to confirm flow sheet and test work. And thirdly, that this is development work, this itself, that we can do ourselves at Zulu in our own lab.
Okay.
So there's really not a lot of cost associated with it.
Okay. So you'll be looking to start it, will you? I'm pushing a bit on that, but
I am. I'm consciously looking at it.
Okay.
Zulu. Look, the frustration over the delay in the spodumene is immense, but it's necessary that we look to where we next go with this.
Right.
Spodumene prices, whilst I expect to get better because of the technical grade nature of what I think we can produce there, they compel us to look at the broader industrial minerals environment, which is what we're doing.
Okay. If I can finish off, it was brought to my attention just this morning about tungsten. And I know you know a lot about tungsten, George, but I've heard about perhaps rumours of a ban on exports from China. And there's just some interesting, I do have some comments on that, of course, because you've got RHA, haven't you as well? I know we're talking about Zulu here, but have you got any comments on what's going on at Tungsten, with the tungsten situation at the minute, and how it could perhaps, be benefit to Prem?
Well, let me just reiterate where we are, that we've got a plant sitting at Zulu under care and maintenance. The plant belongs to Prem 100%. The claims are in a company of which there is a 51-49 relationship. We are in an ongoing negotiation to resolve that aspect of it. And when that aspect can be resolved, we need to go back and put this back into production. But more significantly, as of a couple of hours ago, I was in a separate discussion with other parties in regard to how to optimize the RHA tungsten circuit, whether or not we should return the original rod mill that was at Zulu to RHA, or whether or not we should take the EDS and use that as a tertiary crusher, which could do a very good job, we believe, at RHA. And interestingly enough, I was reminded by the supplier of the EDS that they had previously done milling test, or crushing test work for me on this. They have the details. So it is an active, ongoing situation within Prem. It is one that we should get back to. Not much more to say about that one, other than please, I'd like to try and roll on and get the 5149 issue resolved and get back to.
Okay. Well, thank you, George. A fair bit covered in that interview. We're looking forward to perhaps talking to you next week whilst you're on site, if you can find a few minutes to update us on how things are looking. But all on track for, the next week or two to get the production going. So thank you very much for joining us today, George Roach, CEO of Premier African Minerals.
Mark, thanks very much.